So why work 80 hours a week? Well, men will do it, some men, very few. A handful of hyper-competitive men who are obsessed with hitting the pinnacle of the given dominance hierarchy they're in will happily work 80 hours a week, and they'll forego everything else. Relationships, family, children, way in the second category. And so those men are often very difficult to live with too, because they're so obsessed with their career. It's hard to have a relationship with them. And maybe they don't have much of a relationship with their kids, but they're damn good at what they do, and part of that is they're smart and disciplined, and they'll work non-stop all the time. It's like an obsession, and that's the sort of people who run things. Those are the people who run things. Well, they're often also disagreeable too, because you want to manage people? Really? They're not going to like you. You know, and it's not an easy thing to not be liked, and actually if you're an agreeable person, and women are more agreeable than men, it's quite painful to be disliked. But if you're in a managerial and executive position, the probability that people are going to like you is quite low. Those positions are very stressful, partly because of the interpersonal dynamics, and they're also incredibly, incredibly competitive. So we've got things backwards in our culture. We're thinking, at least in part, why aren't there more women in positions of power? Wrong question. The right question is, why are there any men at all who want those positions of power? Because it's not just positions of power. You have to be such a knothead to think that. Oh, it's a position of power. It's like, sure, but it's a position of overwhelming responsibility. And if you make mistakes, you're done. Right? It's not like you occupy that position of power and everyone does what they're told all the time and your life is easy. It's like, forget about that. People are on your case to do exactly the right thing all the time, 100% of the time. And maybe you want that and maybe you don't. So I don't know what people think is these people are all sitting in their offices with their feet up on the desk, smoking cigars and oppressing the world. It's like, that isn't how it works. Those people, they work flat out all the time. So, and it's fine if that's what you want, and some people are like that. They're hyper-industrious people, right? From a trait perspective, no matter where you put them. If you put them in a forest with an axe, they just wander around chopping down trees non-stop, right? Because it's built into them. But if you want to have a balanced life, and you should want that, you know, because the other thing you'll find, and this is God's gospel truth, is that the older you get, if you have any sense at all, the more important your family is to you. Like the utility of your career, maybe that peaks around 35 or 40, and it starts to decline pretty rapidly after that. And what happens, if you're fortunate, you have someone in your life that you love, that you've woven yourself together with, and you have some kids so that you have something to do from the time you're 50 till the time you're 80. And so it's a real mistake. It's a barren future without children, man, I can tell you that. It's a real mistake. And so we do a terrible job of say, putting that image forward and saying, well, yeah, now, you know, because women have access to the birth control pill now and can compete in the same domains as men, roughly speaking, there is a real practical problem here. It's partly an economic problem now, because when I was roughly your age, it was still possible for a one-income family to exist. Well, you know that wages have been flat, except in the upper 1% since 1973. Why? Well, it's easy. What happens when you double the labor force? What happens? You have the value of labor. So now we're in a situation where it takes two people to make as much as one did before. So we went from a situation where women's career opportunities were relatively limited to where they were relatively unlimited and there were two incomes, to where, and so women could work, to a situation where women have to work and they only make half as much as they would have otherwise. And now we're going to go into a situation, this is the next step, whereas women will work because men won't. And that's what's coming now. So there was an economist article showing that 50% now of boys in school are having trouble with their basic subjects. And you look around you in universities, you can see this happening. I've watched it over decades. I would say 90% of the people in my personality class are now women. There won't be a damn man left in university in 10 years, except in the STEM fields. And it's a complete bloody catastrophe. And it's a catastrophe for women, because I don't know where the hell you're going to find someone to have a, you know, to marry and have a family with if this keeps happening. I talked to Frans de Waal 2 weeks ago, and that'll be out soon, and he's the world's greatest living primatologist, perhaps. De Waal's work is unbelievably important. It's unbelievably important because he's concentrated on the idea of the alpha male.
And you know, we have in popular parlance, we have an idea of the alpha chimp, right? Or the alpha male for that matter. And it's pretty much a postmodern neo-Marxist view of primate sociology. And that is that the biggest, ugliest, meanest male dominates by brute force. And so now he's at the top of the pyramid. And so the implicit claim there from the biologists is that power, those who express power most effectively, power being the ability to compel, those who express power most effectively will dominate the pyramid of dominance, of social hierarchy, and they'll prevail reproductively. Well, that's pretty gloomy, that idea, you know, but people think, well, that's how you look at the world if you're sensible. It's like, well, Frans de Waal's been studying chimps for 30 years, and that's not true. That is not what happens. He told me flat out that frequently small male can become alpha, especially if he has the support of an influential female. And the small male becomes alpha and has the support of the influential female, not because he expresses arbitrary power, but because he's unbelievably good at mutual reciprocation. And so he has friends, and he does things for his friends, and they do things for him, and they trust each other, and he has lots of friends, which also means he has no enemies, which turns out to be really important, because the brute chimps, like the psychopath alphas, they do rule now and then, but they get torn to shreds by their enemies, because, you know, they're tough, let's say, and mean, but they have an off day, and two chimps they stomped a week before ally together and tear them, literally tear them into shreds. And so the psychopath chimp types who use power to attain dominance have very short rules and end in a very bloody way. And so de Waal has pointed out, like Piaget did among children, that power is an unstable ethic upon which to base a social hierarchy, even for chimps. And chimps are male-dominated, they have a patriarchal society, and they're relatively brutal. And it doesn't even work for them. It certainly doesn't work for human beings. So whatever's at the apex of the pyramid, it's not, as the bloody Marxists insist, you know, the raw expression of power and exploitation. Wrong. Wrong. Not the case. Doesn't even work in nature. Doesn't work for rats. Doesn't work for chimpanzees. Certainly doesn't work for people. And then there is a kind of natural ethic that emerges out of that, right? Because with rats and with chimps and other social animals, it varies to some degree from species to species, there's the necessity for something like mutual reciprocity as the basis for successful social organization. And that's something like treat your neighbor like you would want to be treated.
You know, you watch all those rom-coms where there's always kind of a beta male guy who's being real friendly and always failing miserably with the women because basically he's lying to himself and to them. He's a persona. And a persona is the face that you show to the world when you're trying to pretend and to convince yourself and others that you're, I would say harmless, but we could say a good person. But a good person isn't harmless. A good person is capable of, well, maybe a good person is capable of anything, but is willing to hold that in abeyance.